This is probably one of the most debated topics online, especially for up-and-coming composers. And having done this for 15 years now, I do have some things that I wish I could say to myself 15 years ago with a time machine. That's a popular question I get in interviews a lot. Here's the key to this whole debacle. We are the ones that are making this music. Anything creative, I don't care if you're doing painting or writing a book, anyone who's doing anything creative sees an inherent value in their work. And maybe there's not a price tag on it, but they value it to a certain extent. Now, being the creators of this work, if we immediately devalue our creations, no one else is going to go, you know what? I actually think you're wrong. I think that's worth more than that. And I'm not talking about money either, and money can be part of it. But if you devalue your work, no one else is going to up the value for you. You're kind of shooting yourself in the foot before you even start. Okay, your mother will definitely up the value on it. I know mine will. But unfortunately, most of our moms aren't in the place to hire us as composers. So here's the key. You need to place a value on your music from the beginning and make sure that whoever you're working with understands that there is an inherent value here. They are getting something that has value. And again, I'm not talking about money yet. We'll get to that. It's all about communicating the fact that you're not giving it away for free. Okay, that's why there's that title that probably got a lot of people's attention on the front of the video. I really believe that you should never work for free. Does that mean that you always get paid? No. But you're getting something. You're making sure that the people you're working with understand there is value in what you're contributing to the film, to the game, to the TV show, whatever it is. Now, how do you do that though? You talk about how important you are and how important your music is. You write a contract. Okay, it doesn't need to be a 30-page thing like I'd get from EA or Sony. I'm talking about a single-page deal memo. And you can Google that. There's thousands of them out there in Word doc format. You change a couple things and you're good to go. You put it in writing. You put it in a deal memo or a contract. Now, what this deal memo or contract is going to do is it's going to assign a value to your music for the people that are hiring you. Maybe you're not charging them money for your music, but there is going to be a dollar sign attached in that deal memo. Now, you're going to waive the fee, let's say. Let's say it's a startup game. They don't have any money. There's no way they can pay you anything, but they want to be able to give you a credit, and maybe there's some other stuff that you can have in that contract that we'll talk about in a minute. But the idea is, regardless of what the budget is, you have if it's for games, a per minute fee for your music. If they're going to hire you for 10 minutes of music, let's say, and your fee, just for the sake of math, because it's early and math is not my strong suit, your fee is $10 a minute. So they want to hire you for 10 minutes. You're going to say 10 minutes of music at $10 a minute is $100. Now they have no budget, so you're going to have a discount there that's going to take away $100. Well, then if you're taking away the money, what's the point of having the contract? The point is you have declared a value to your music. So hopefully, if they want to work with you in the future and they come back, you've already set a precedent. Now, I know you've given them music without charging them technically, but you've set a precedent for what you think your music is worth. And I promise you that makes a huge difference in their minds, even if they don't realize it. It's not this, he worked for free, completely nebulous, like in the air, intangible sort of thing. There's a piece of paper that says, oh, he charges $10 a minute for his music. Don't charge $10 a minute. We'll get to that in a minute. This is just for math. He charges $10 a minute for his music, and, well, maybe next time we could give him half that. You've already started negotiating on your next project without even having to say a word. And the other important thing about the contract is not only is it in writing for them to refer to later on, it's in writing for you to refer to as well. Now, maybe you're going to go, who knows, how many gigs, games, TV, online videos, anything like that, before you're actually charging money for your music. But there's some other things in the contract that you need to have listed that is very, very important. Number one If you are not getting paid cash money for your music, you need to retain the rights. That means that you are lending them the music, you're licensing it to them for all time, infinitum, throughout the universe, and all that great stuff for them to use on their project. They can't use it for anything else. They're allowed to use it any way they want. They're not giving you a dime, but you retain the rights to the music. Now that means that you can take it and use it for something else if you want to. I've never really found that to work. Usually what I end up doing is I put it in a music library somewhere. If I don't have a connection to a music library company yet, I put it in my music library folder, and I do alternate mixes and things like that and make sure everything's backed up and I have all my sounds. So if I want to open it maybe in a year, I have everything there. I can pull it up, piece of cake, and export it all and do mixes for whatever music library company maybe I'm working with in the future. The important thing is you are retaining the rights to your music and you are controlling where that music goes. The last thing you want to do is just let them use your music and say they can use it in the film or the game, and you don't have any contracts, and who knows what is going to happen to that music. I've had small films that have gotten picked up and gone onto distribution on HBO and things like that, and they never even thought it would be seen anywhere, let alone on a big movie channel like that. But I had my contract in place, so all the royalties were ready, which is the next thing we're going to talk about. All the paperwork for that was ready to go, and it was sort of like planning for, it's like insurance. You're planning for a best case scenario, but you're also planning for a worst case scenario. All of this needs to be on paper. Now, I've done work with some people that I consider some of my closest friends, and one of the first things that we do is, let's get the deal memo out of the way, or let's just get a quick contract signed, because people who are professionals understand that that is the way business is done. You have something in writing, even if it's just simple. You have something in writing there, it's dated, everyone's signed it, and it's not a matter of having something as a point of legal contention, where you're like, all right, now your name's on this and I'm going to take you to court if you don't. You're never going to take anyone to court. Trust me. I've lost tens of thousands of dollars on jobs where the company did not fulfill their end of the contract. Did I take them to court? No, because it's going to cost more than that to go to court, and they're going to end up, even if I win, paying pennies on the dollar. It's not to legally cover yourself and have, ammo for court dates. You want to avoid that completely. You don't want to be the contentious composer. You want to be the easy to work with composer. So it's all about just having things spelled out in a very friendly manner so everyone understands what's going on. And honestly, once you start doing this, if you get 10 or 12 contracts in, you're going to forget what your original rate was or what the numbers even were. And now you can go back and reference those as well. And hopefully as you're going, that $10 a minute rate is going up slowly but surely as you're maybe getting paid a percentage of the rate. Now, if they have a super low budget, but they actually have a budget, that's great. So you're discounting your rate by a certain percentage to match whatever budget they have. And they will see like, wow, I'm getting a 70% discount. And it's not about them saving money. It's about assigning that value to your music. And in their heads, even though they only paid 30% of your fee, they will recognize what that original fee is. I can't stress this more, especially now in the digital age where maybe you're not even meeting the people that you're working with. Having something written, having signatures, they're committing to something there. And that means a lot. It makes you look more professional, and it makes them understand that you value your work. And I'm not saying to do some outrageous, $10,000 a minute fee and then give them a $600,000 discount. It's about being fair and honest and straightforward from the very beginning. And trust me, they'll appreciate it. They'll appreciate how professional you are. And even though you're a composer, which a lot of times can be like, woohoo, I write music. Yeah, have some music. You get a score and you get a score. We want to have fun with our music, but we also want to be professional doing it. So that's kind of the fence that you want to ride. And the important thing is registering your music that you retain the rights to, registering that at the U.S. Copyright Office. I've done that with all of the music library stuff I've written over the years, which is hundreds and hundreds of terrible tracks of music, but it's all registered with the Copyright Office. So if something happens and it gets picked up by someone somehow online, got distributed without my knowledge, I had it all registered 20 years ago. So I've got proof that I was the one that wrote it. And again, it's all about knowing your rights and finding a professional professional rights organization. In the States, it's either BMI or ASCAP. Again, even if you're licensing the music and retaining the rights, or if they have a fee and they're going to retain the rights to the music, which is basically a work for hire, you need to have whatever you're working on, especially if it's film and TV, registered with either BMI or ASCAP if you're in the States. And there's CSAC and other things overseas. If it's something you guys are interested in, I'm sure I could do a little bit of research and provide some more information, but honestly, I would just be Googling it. And I'm with BMI right now, and I think I've got, maybe it's CSAC for overseas. I can't quite remember, but all my video game stuff is registered as well, because a lot of it is being used in music libraries. Once the game's out for like a year or so, they'll use it for Discovery Channel shows. I think I had a Dead Space queue on something about the Titanic, which was really funny. Seems a little inappropriate, and it was a little strange. Someone sent me a link years ago. But having it registered, that's like your backup plan. So for example, that film that I mentioned that they didn't know would ever get any distribution, or it was kind of all up in the air, I had everything registered, and literally I was like, popped up the menu on my TV screen, and I was like, oh wow, look, it's showing on Showtime. That's so cool. And I knew that I would be getting back-end payments on that, which with BMI, ASCAP, and all those other rights organizations, they basically keep track of when things are broadcast, especially on TV. But the idea is I get a little bit of money on the back end when something's shown because of the licensing that happens, and my name being tied to that credit for that particular TV show. And there are people in LA that did TV for 20 years and literally retire on those kind of payments. They can be substantial, especially if you're talking about, like Ron Jones or someone who's done Star Trek, something that's just going to be showing forever all around the world. They're still getting checks for that stuff. And significant checks. I'm not getting significant checks, but it is something that contributes every quarter to kind of my annual income. And if I hadn't kept up with it from the very beginning by filing at the Copyright Office, registering with BMI, most of that stuff wouldn't even be here. So it really does make a difference. And especially if you're starting out in your career, get all that lined up straight. Get your contracts straight. Get your stuff registered with the Professional Rights Organization and with the U.S. Copyright Office, and get that back end coming in. Slow but steady stream. It is a little bit of a slow but steady scream as well. You're like, ah! Because it's 9 months for any of those royalties when something's shown. It's going to take 9 months before you start seeing any payments. So it is a bit of a long-term marathon rather than a sprint. But it's something that, this is a career building thing. You want to be able to look back in 20 years and see that you've done it right from the beginning. And I will probably do a separate episode just on that. So let's say that there's no budget and you are retaining the rights to your music. Good for you. That's really smart. Is there any other way that maybe you can get paid, if not financially? Well, obviously a credit is very important. And that's something that I think the reason this topic is so debated, because every single project, literally every single project, is completely different. So you need to take kind of like an inward glance at your career and where you are and figure out what you're willing to negotiate in order to let them use your music. Because I promise that there will never be a job where you're like, wow, they're actually paying me more than I think my music's even worth. Or, oh my gosh, I'm doing this game and they have so much music allocated for the game. Like, this is great. It's going to be like the perfect amount of music for the game. It's never going to happen. There's always going to be less budget than you would hope for and less music allotted for than you think actually needs to happen. So it's a give and take from the beginning. And this is no one's fault. This is just, in a perfect world, a game that's 18 hours long would have, 12 or 15 hours of music so that there was enough to kind of have space for no music, and then other things where there's a little bit of music, and you could sort of score, like, if it were up to me, it'd be more like 50% of the game. But games are big on music nowadays. It's just never going to happen. So it's a matter of figuring out what other things you can do as sort of a trade-off. Now, a lot of times if it's a startup game, they might have back end, kind of like residual payments based on their sales, let's say. And that can be tricky, to be perfectly honest, because I've never known any game to actually officially make money in terms of the big games, the kind of Dead Spaces and Tomb Raiders and things like that I've worked on, because there's so much that goes into it on the front end, and then the marketing and all the production, and they're always losing money on paper because that's what makes good business sense. So if you're looking to get, some percentage of money like after they've recouped their costs, chances are, and there are obviously exceptions all the time, but chances are that's a kind of a lose-lose, because it's just not the kind of thing that with bigger games actually happens. Now, if it's a small game and it's like 2 people making the game and you're doing the music, then there's probably a good chance they're like, hey, we've only got a little bit to recoup, and then we're going to share a percentage of sales. That's fine. Something that I think is a little more tangible is maybe after a certain number of units are sold, if it's a game, you get, an extra fee of some sort. I've done that with some smaller games just because they didn't have as much as they wanted up front, and they actually offered that as kind of a back-end deal. But it was just after a certain amount of sales. So there wasn't an intangible, like when we make money, you get a certain percent. It was a very fixed price, or after a certain number of units sold. They did the math. As far as actually charging like dollar amounts for your music, that's really, really hard. It's really hard to quantify that because it's so different from person to person, from project to project, from developer to developer, from composer to composer. I did an independent game. This was probably 3 years ago. And if I'm remembering correctly, they had a $5,000 budget, and I did like 60 minutes of music for them. And I don't know, that's less than $100 a minute. So we're actually getting close to the $10 a minute mark there. Now, I didn't do the game because I wanted to make money on it. I did the game because it was a local developer here in North Carolina where I live that I'd worked with before. The game looked hysterical, and the score I knew was going to be a lot of fun. And literally, I took that money and spun it around and just paid musicians to play live. So the whole score is live. I think I spent like 2 weeks working on it. Played a bunch of instruments myself, had another friend of mine come in and play some like dobro and things that I'm not good at, and piece the score together that way. But it was not a money-making kind of game. It was a, oh my gosh, this was so much fun, and I learned so much about it kind of game. It's not a competition between you and all the other composers to see who can get the job or who can charge less for the job and therefore land it rather than the other people, or say, I'll work for free, and then they win. It's not a competition. It's for me at least, it's all about what can I learn from this? What am I going to benefit from this in the long run? And with that particular game, that indie game, which was called Fat Chicken, and I'll put a link to the soundtrack in the description, I had a great time bundling. You know what? If I find the pictures, I'll put the pictures in there too. Bundling like 6 microphones together. I recorded the whole thing without any EQ. And the idea was I had anywhere between 4 and 6 microphones kind of in each little pod of recording that I was going to do, whether it was a dobro or acoustic guitar, electric guitar. And what I would do was phase align all the mics before I recorded, so I could just turn the faders up, and I grouped the microphones so that one was really bright, one was really dark. I knew one had a lot of mid-range, and I would just move the faders to kind of EQ the sound. And that was pretty much my learning experience, was not only learning how all the microphones sounded, but also learning some alternatives to mixing that didn't involve just throwing a lot of plugins on things. So that's what I got out of that game. Plus, I had a great time for 2 weeks writing this like crazy quirky music, most of which was in a major key. And it was just a really great experience. I had literally the entire team, all 5 of us, I think, in the room during multiple days when I was recording the stuff. And they're sitting there on their like iPads playing the game while we're recording the music. And it was just a cool experience. So for me, it was worth it taking that money, throwing it at the live performers, and doing the score. And now I've got this just really fun, quirky score that stands, and I own the rights to the music. So that's one example of kind of how things like that work. no money made on my part, quote unquote. Because it's all about, for me, putting the game or the film or the TV show in the best light and making sure that everyone knows up front exactly what's going on. So hopefully this helped a little bit. I only had like 3 things written down over here in terms of kind of talking, but contract, contract, contract. That's the most important thing. And assign a value to your music. And it doesn't matter, you could start at $50 a minute if you wanted to. If you want to divide it in your head that way, if it's for a game. If it's for a film, like an independent film, just do a small value. Figure out how much music you write a day and assign a day rate or even an hourly rate if you want to. I mean, some people start that way. So, well, I'll charge, $15 an hour if I'm in the studio, and for 8 hours that equals X. So for a week, that would be Y, and I could probably do so many minutes of music in a week. There's some simple sort of abstract ways you can extrapolate some sort of a number, but the important thing is you have a number. So go out there, be excited about your music, be professional, retain your music rights, understand where it's all going, and most importantly, have fun.